Hello everyone, this is James with Rogue Reader here for another first reading review. Today I wanted to look at the Force Unleashed novelization. So first off, why the Force Unleashed? This isn't really a new book. Well, I've been on a bit of a novelization phase. It started when I did my episode on Revenge of the Sith, and since then I've done the original trilogy novelizations. I kind of got this idea that it might be fun to treat Star Wars Legends as kind of a book universe. And so whenever I want to kind of consume Star Wars Legends material, I would focus on the books, meaning I would engage in the movies through the novelizations when going through Legends content. And kind of when I just want to do like general movies and shows and things like that, things more on the Disney canon side, that's when I would watch the movies. That's kind of an idea I'm tinkering with, and I'm going through the novelizations as such just to see how those kind of hold up in my opinion. But when it comes to The Force Unleashed, I've never read the novelization of that game. When it comes to the game The Force Unleashed, just to give some of my background and kind of thoughts on the game, I personally love the Force Unleashed video game. It's probably one of my favorite just kind of Star Wars things. At the time when it came out and I played it to me, it was one of the most cinematic Star Wars games at that time when it was released. I loved the story. I loved the idea of Darth Vader's secret apprentice and just kind of how it connected. It was a good connection between episodes 3 and 4. I actually include the disc with my movies on my shelf. So whenever I do a movie rewatch, if I'm just doing the movies, I'll actually try to include The Force Unleashed, even if it's just watching the cutscenes. That's how much I love that game. That one and Star Wars Bounty Hunter, those are two video games that I'll include on my movie marathons. So that being said, I thought, well, if the story is really my favorite thing, maybe I should check out the novelization, since that's kind of the phase I've been on in terms of Star Wars books recently. Now, I have read the novelization of The Force Unleashed 2. I did get that one because that novelization has a whole other side story that is not in the game, so there's a lot more added stuff in it, which is why I was interested and picked it up. But this was my first time reading the original novelization. I also normally don't talk about the covers of books, but I just want to point out I do really like this cover. So this is part of the Legends Essential Collection, where basically Disney's been re-releasing Legends books, and they've been giving them all new covers. In general, I actually haven't been a fan of the new covers. I think a lot of them look kind of weird. Sometimes the characters look a little off, or just something about them feels a little weird. I like most of them, I like the old covers better, but for this one, I actually do like the new cover much better. And I mean, the original cover was just a picture of the video game cover itself. So I appreciate that they made new artwork. I think it looks good. It's of a key scene in the beginning of the book of when Vader knights him. And yeah, this is one of the few new covers to come out that I actually really like. So I did just want to bring that up quickly. I don't think I mentioned the author of the book, The Force Unleashed, is Sean Williams, who I think also did the Force Unleashed 2 novelization. As a warning, there might be minor spoilers. I'll try to avoid big ones, but this is a book based on an old video game at this point, and as a novelization, points of comparison between it and kind of the source material it's based off of is kind of part of a review, but I'll still try to keep things general, but there might be minor spoilers here. But just as a kind of general setup, if you've never played The Force Unleashed or read it or any of the other interacted with it in any of the other ways, because it was I think a multimedia project at the time. Basically, the plot is that it takes place in between episodes 3 and 4, and it involves Darth Vader, who has a secret apprentice that he uses to hunt down any survivors of Order 66. And eventually that secret apprentice, whose name is Starkiller, one of the several Star Killers in Star Wars. Before Starkiller Base, you had, I think, Bendeck Starkiller in the Knights of the Old Republic, and I think even in the original script, Luke's name was going to be Anakin Starkiller. So that name kind of has some history in Star Wars, but that's the name of the character in this book. And he even ends up getting involved in the formation of the Rebel Alliance eventually. So that's just kind of the general setup of the story of The Force Unleashed. And if you're wondering why it's called The Force Unleashed, it's because the game itself is very over the top in the things you could do with your Force powers. You're talking about, I mean, the reveal trailer itself is Starkiller pulling down a Star Destroyer with the Force. So that gives you an idea. That's the game side of things. The idea is that just have a bunch of fun running around with the Force. But as I've said before, I actually really like the story of the game too. Now let's talk about characters. Mainly, the book switches between the perspectives of Starkiller himself and then Juno Eclipse, who's his pilot and eventual love interest in the book. Now I will say there is a lot of focus on Juno here in terms of you see a lot of the scenes in the book through her point of view. And I remember she was kind of a main character and a main point of view in the Force Unleashed 2 novelization as well. So I think the author just really liked writing for her. She kind of overshadows the other characters at times because there are scenes, critical scenes that'll be between, Starkiller and Darth Vader or other things that you would see in the game where she wasn't around, and the author kind of shoehorns her in by having her kind of spy on these scenes on the cameras. So she has a lot of focus in this book, and sometimes it feels a little out of place. And I think sometimes having her point of view on things takes away from other characters that I would have liked to have seen what they were thinking of during those scenes. There's no point of views from Darth Vader in this book, which I would have loved to have got inside his head on how he thinks about his secret apprentice. Like I said, it's a lot of Juno in terms of that. Now, I do like how she's written. I think she's done well, and I think the author does a good job of expanding on her backstory and making her much more of a character. So that is all done well, but it does kind of come with this caveat that she might be used a little too much in the book. Starkiller himself is done well. Obviously, you do have a lot from his point of view too, and I think it does a good job of expanding on his character and his thoughts. But there are some other things kind of involving him that I didn't quite care for as much, but I'll get to that in a little bit. The other main character is his droid Proxy, who is basically programmed to both help Starkiller and randomly try to attack him to test him. Proxy he's fine. I think the author kind of undercuts one of his major moments in the game. There's a part on when you go back to Raxus Prime where Proxy is heavily involved in a part of that. That's really cool, and the author kind of changes that up a lot, and I think kind of undercuts Proxy's character a little when he does that. But again, he's not really the focus. The focus is Starkiller and much more Juno herself. Now, I have to talk about the writing of the book itself because unfortunately that is really a big weak point of this book. So, you can't escape that this is a book based on a video game, and it's a video game where you're running through a lot of locations and you're just killing stormtroopers left and right and just using a bunch of fancy force powers. So I don't begrudge any author for having to kind of translate that in a way that works as just a story, because if you were just to describe running around killing hundreds of people all the time, that doesn't work as a story, as a book. It works for a game, but it might not work. It's not going to work for a book. So I know that's a challenging task, but unfortunately, I don't think the author really handled it too well here. It feels like 90% of the encounters that Starkiller has in this book are described as a bunch of stormtroopers are in the way, Starkiller quickly defeats him and finishes off the remaining with Sith lightning. He likes to say Sith lightning a lot in this book. And the problem is there's no real descriptions. It's just written off very quickly. He dispatches the stormtroopers and that's done. And I kind of wish the author would find other ways, more creative ways to have gotten around that. And I know he could have, because there are a couple instances in the book where he does. So like the ending on the Death Star. In the game, the final level of the game on the Death Star, it's really like a gauntlet run. You're just running through all of the toughest enemies in the game, a bunch of them. The author kind of gets around that here because instead he kind of creates a story where Starkiller gets to the Death Star, he finds some Wookiee slaves that are helping build it, he frees them, kind of creates a riot, and then the Wookiees help guide him through the Death Star to find out where he's going. It's a very creative way to not just make it an enemy gauntlet and to kind of not just force Starkiller into killing a bunch of things and to add a little bit more story around it in a way that's logical and makes sense. So I know he's capable of doing that. Same thing with the reveal when Starkiller finds out who his father is on Kashyyyk. I love that part of the book. It's probably my favorite part because he has this whole vision where he's in the Sith Stalker armor from the game, and that armor has like a bunch of lightsabers on it, and he's using all of them, and it's this intense vision, and it's really well written. And I just wish there was more of that other than those two examples throughout the book that the author could have utilized. I mean, the game is called The Force Unleashed for a reason. There's a lot of crazy things you can do in there, and I think the author could have just kind of had fun with that and just had some really creative descriptions on and what Starkiller does to these stormtroopers and other enemies of the game. Like, I mean, in the game, you could pick up a stormtrooper, impale him with your lightsaber, shoot him with lightning, and then throw him at other stormtroopers, which will then explode. And you can just do kind of crazy stuff like that. And I think he could have had some fun with some of those descriptions in this, but he didn't. He doesn't really do that most of the time, and that's unfortunate because it kind of makes what I think is a great story feel kind of bland in its writing. Even though I love the story of the game, and I think it could be done well in a book, things just move too quickly and without much impact for that to really sink in the novelization form, at least from how I'm finding it. Overall, unfortunately, I can't really recommend The Force Unleashed novelization. It's just a little too bland, not a lot of focus in the areas that I think needed it, and I think you're just better off experiencing the story in its other mediums. Play the games. I know the main version that I like the best, the PS3 version, I think that's on Steam. I think the older kind of PS2/Wii version has been re-released on the Switch. And even if you don't have access to those, you can just watch the cutscenes on YouTube. That's what I would do when I would do my movie marathons. And if I knew I didn't have enough time to play a full game, I would just watch the cutscenes. And I think even that, unfortunately, works better than reading the novelization. So that was kind of a disappointment, but I'm still happy to have given it a try. I'd love to know your thoughts on The Force Unleashed. I know this one is kind of, at times at least, it can be a divisive kind of Star Wars story, but I'd love to know what you think of it. Just for a quick general update, I am chugging through my backlog of Star Wars books. I'm almost done. I don't have much left. I'm going to do first reading reviews on the From a Certain Point of View novels of the original trilogy. I'm just going to do all three of those in one video. I finished Star Wars Outlaws recently, so I'm going to start reading the book that came out recently on that. I think Low Red Moon it's called. So I'm going to do a first reading review on that one. There might be one more I do a review on. And then after that, I'm basically caught up on my backlog, and I'll start focusing more on full-length podcast episodes. I will be doing the novelizations of The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones just to finish those out. And then after that, I'm going to be moving on to one of the more famous Star Wars books to kind of really start my kickback in getting into the podcast episodes. But that's going to be it for me today. I will see you in the next video, and may the Force be with you.